Hello, my name's Tom, and I'm going to be talking about my team selection for the Great British Grand Prix, Great Britain Grand Prix, Silverstone Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix. Got there in the end. We're going to be talking about my team selection for the British Grand Prix. This is my team coming out of Austria. Had a stinker. It wasn't good, mainly because of the whole collision between Verstappen and Lando, and I think a lot of you guys, fellow F1 fantasy managers, suffered similarly to me. Those of us that escaped were people that probably ended up going with like the double B tier team with like a Piastri and a Russell, who obviously hit the jackpot this weekend. For me personally, it wasn't. It was a bit of a mad Saturday morning. You know, you can't always control everything that's going on in your life. You can, to some extent, or to almost 100% at least extent, control what goes on in your mind. And I think it's good advice for myself going forward, and maybe for any of you guys that suffer from similar busy lives, is to just have that moment of calm before locking your team. Make sure you're happy with that decision, because I didn't do that this weekend. I normally am very good at it, but I just let life get on top of me, and I was too much of a panic, and I ended up making like a last minute switch between Mercedes into McLaren, which obviously cost me as a result of my madness on Saturday morning. So yeah, going forward, I'm going to try and really focus, even if it's mad, to try and focus and make sure I've got that moment of calm before locking in my team. I say that, and this Saturday, as the deadline comes up for Silverstone, my brother's getting married, so obviously I'm going to be at the wedding. So it's going to be another mad Saturday. But I'll try and find a moment of calm during the wedding at some point. Obviously not whilst the bride's walking down the aisle or anything like that, but I will be, another mad Saturday for me coming up, but I will try and find some calm and get a good team going into the British Grand Prix. So yeah, as you can see, pretty bad for me. Norris was looking great, obviously, and then he had the collision. The Saubers, they've been all right for me, but the last couple of weekends in particular, they've just been a bit sucky. They've just clearly not got the pace, and that means they're not really going to get those positions gained. They're not really going to get many overtakes either. I'm not sure how did we do here. Did we get any race positions gained? 3. There's no overtakes at all. Bottas 6 overtakes in fairness, but only 2 positions gained. There's just not enough points to get that 0.5 rise from the C tier assets that you want from them. So if I'm going to wildcard, which is certainly a real possibility for me this weekend, then I would like to see the kick Saubers kind of out there, at least one of them, likely Bottas, out of there. Just not overly happy. Yuki, at least he got me the 0.5 rise. That's pretty decent, even though the RBs don't look particularly strong. And Pierre Gasly, I think, is a strong C tier asset at the moment. A couple of back-to-back price rises and some, double-figure points, which is always great. And that's kind of where I ended up in Austria. The -10 as well, first -10 of the season. Yeah, not happy with my week at all, and I dropped out the top. Where was I? About 1,300, and now I'm down to just inside the top 3,000. So yeah, pretty miserable. So let's jump straight into looking at the B tier assets for me. I've not included Alonso because he's just a write-off. Aston Martin are just kind of like out my mind right now. Perez also needs to show me a lot more. Like, he's not doing badly because he's getting like overtakes and a few positions gained, but for a B tier asset, you want them to be genuinely like fighting for the podium week in, week out, and Perez is just nowhere near that. So for me, Perez is kind of off the radar at the moment as well. So I'm looking at these 5 guys personally, and I want to try and think about who the best options are, because I'm strongly looking in my team selection, which we'll jump into just a minute after I've had a look at these guys. I am strongly looking at the double B tier sort of lineup going forward for at least the next few races. We don't have any sprints for quite a while now, so I can try and haul in a little bit more budget, because I've been struggling. My budget's kind of stagnated, and these B tier assets, so we can get the right 2 B tier assets each race, could prove quite bountiful for our finances. Getting that 0.3 rise on a regular basis, or on occasion the million rise, which Lando Norris and Verstappen just cannot get, is very appealing. So who are the best out of these 5? Because these are the 5 options that we've got to look at, basically. So I guess I could sort of go in my mind of ranking rather than just going left to right. I think this is tough because it is very tight at the top. But I think the best asset for me is possibly Piastri at the moment. Piastri is in arguably the fastest car at the moment. McLaren has pulled up level, maybe even like jumped ahead of Red Bull. Or that said, there's more upgrades coming this weekend for both Red Bull and McLaren, so that could swing a little bit and seesaw a little bit more over the next couple of races. Who knows? But for me, we don't know what's actually going to happen in the upgrades. For me right now, I think I prefer Piastri ahead of the other guys, but only just. And that's because exactly what I just said. The McLaren is looking like the fastest car. Piastri's had a really good, consistent season. You can see his season average there is very strong, and it's increased over the last 3 races, and that's probably helped to quite a large extent, to be fair, by what happened in Austria, getting on the podium there, P2, thanks to Lando and Verstappen knocking themselves out a little bit. But nevertheless, I think Piastri is just very, very consistent, and he's capable of a good weekend. He had a good weekend around here in Silverstone. Last year, in fact, Silverstone was when I jumped on Piastri when he cost a measly 7 million. I remember it well. He cost 7 million. I went on with him this time last year in Silverstone. He finished, I believe, on the podium or 4th or something. I can't remember. Somewhere really up high. Got the million rise up to 8 million, and I was sitting pretty, and that's kind of what pushed me forward for the rest of the season. So yeah, I do think Piastri is looking very strong, and as long as he can sort of do fine, he should be scoring in the 20 region. The trouble is, do you want to 2 times him? I'm not sure, which is why going for the double B tier lineup is a little bit risky. But anyway, for me, Piastri's up there. In the next 2, I think, and this is maybe simplifying things because I don't think the Ferraris are completely out of it, but I think that for me the next 2 are kind of Russell and Lewis. I feel like going into Silverstone, like Lewis has got an incredible record around Silverstone. I think he's a great pick this weekend. He does cost fractionally more than George Russell. I think it's about 0.4 more. So for me personally, that when you're very tight on budget, that could be a reason to go with Russell instead of Lewis. I think specifically for Silverstone, I'd rather have Lewis, but I think Russell over the course of the season so far, he's out qualifying Lewis consistently. He's proven he's doing well in the race. He is a little bit susceptible, as we all know, to the odd mistake when he comes under pressure, but other than that odd mistake, as long as it doesn't cost him like crashing into the wall, I'm thinking Singapore last year, for example, as long as it doesn't cost him to that extent, then I think Russell is going to be a great consistent option. Again, it concerns me like putting the 2 times on him, but then again, you think back to the beginning of the season when we had the, do we go all in with Verstappen and Red Bull? We had other teams going Red Bull, Ferrari, and then a mixture of either Perez, Sainz, or Leclerc. We were comfortable doing that, and those teams were scoring very strongly. With a B tier asset driver leading the way as the 2 times, so maybe we can continue doing that with a second B tier asset, which we couldn't afford earlier on in the season. So maybe that is just a good way to go forward. So yeah, for me, the Mercedes is certainly on the up. The upgrades have worked wonders. They're not quite on the level of Red Bull and McLaren, but I think they're certainly getting there. And again, I believe there are more upgrades coming for Mercedes this weekend in Silverstone. So I'm expecting good things from the 2 British drivers. And then, yeah, I say the Ferraris, they're not a write-off for me. And I think they'll do okay around Silverstone. But they've obviously taken a dip. They had that disaster in Canada. They haven't been really back on it. I know Sainz got the podium, but that was helped out to some extent, obviously, with Norris and Verstappen clashing. I think the Ferraris are fine, but they don't excite me anywhere near as much as the Mercedes, who also are coming in at a slightly cut price as well, which is really, really beneficial when you're trying to avoid the likes of Saubers or the likes of Logan Sargent, etc. So for me, kind of like, that's, I guess, the order I've put them actually in the graphic, which is Piastri in the middle there, kind of number 1, backed up by either a Russell or a Hamilton. And if the Ferraris look particularly good, then you could probably go for them. That's kind of where I'm at for them at the moment. So let's have a look at my team going into British Grand Prix. This is obviously what I come out of Austria with, and this is what I'm talking about. The A tier sat on top of 4 C tier drivers, and then the 2 big constructors. This is the same formula that I used at the beginning of the season, where I went with Ferrari, not Ferrari, so I went with Aston Martin, Red Bull, Verstappen. I'm thinking way back to like the likes of Bahrain, for example. In fact, why don't we have a quick look back so you can see exactly what I mean. This is what I started the season with, where I sat there with the best A-tier driver, the best A-tier constructor, and then like the best of the rest that my money could afford. I'm almost like where I am currently at the moment is kind of slipped back into that same thing, except obviously my budget's a lot more than what it was, and I can afford the likes of McLaren, who are obviously really good at the moment. So this team obviously looks great. It does look good, with the exception maybe of the Saubers. And I do think Red Bulls are going to be strong this weekend. I think the best 2 teams will be Red Bull and McLaren. I think they're very good through the high speed. We know there's lots of high speed in Silverstone. Likes of Norris, Piastri, Verstappen in particular always seem to do well around here. They're both bringing upgrades. It makes a lot of sense to just be like, why you even overthink about it? Why are you overthinking it? Why are you thinking about using the wild card when you can just sit on a team like this? And maybe if I want pure points this weekend, this is just a safe option. But I am interested in just gaining value as well. I'm still interested in building budget. I do think that budget is still important, although some people will poo-poo it, but I do think it's still important. I keep coming up like where I'm like, oh, I'm 0.1 short, I'm 0.2 short, or I'm a million short, or a couple of million short. Or there's some people who are like 5 million ahead of me, and they can afford, instead of like a Sonoda, let's imagine we go down to someone like a Sargent. I've got here 17.1. Someone with an extra 4 million or whatever than me, 4 or 5 million, can keep the Norris and the two huge constructors and get like a Russell or a Hamilton. So because I wasn't super focused on building budget earlier on in the season, it's now biting me. The people that were focused on building budget are able to get someone like a Russell or Hamilton in a team that looks like this. I know it looks pretty ugly with Sargent in there as well, and we don't really want Sargent in our teams, but it's just an example of what people can afford, and those teams are out there, and they're going to, each week is going to compound their budget advantage over us. So I do think that the budget is still important. We've still got a long way to go in this season. I know it's not like an infinite season, and building budget is going to be great, because obviously at the end of the season, budget counts for nothing. Ultimately, it was all about the points. Oops, I just punched the microphone. Sorry. But I do think that budget is certainly going to be important because there's still a big chunk of the season to go, and I want to be able to afford better drivers. So let's imagine I'm going to wildcard. Let's just hop it back. So let's imagine I want to wildcard into, or not necessarily in wildcard. I could take another -10, for example, but the likes of Red Bull don't excite me. If this is a big if, and this is highly dependent on the practice sessions, etc., but if the Ferraris look good, then I can squeeze in a team that looks kind of like this, and then I can hop out. For example, a Sonoda, and then I can just about afford a George Russell, like the cheapest of these B tier guys. This loses every single penny. This is what I'm talking about, why budget is important, because if I was just a point short, I'd have to, well, it wouldn't be the end of the world. If I was using the wildcard, I could drop down like a Gasly to, excuse me, a Sonoda or an Ocon, or even go further down if you've got less budget for like a Hulkenberg, etc. But I think I like Gasly at the moment. I think he's one of the optimal C tier assets personally. And yeah, I can go with a team like this, and I think this is a great team for building budget. Apart from the Saubers, I'm not happy about the Saubers, but money's money. They're better than Sargent. You can't have everything. I think, like I just said, I think Gasly's a great C-tier asset. He's on the rise. The Alpines look strong. I think he's good for position gain and overtakes, and just generally holding his position. He's not one to really fall back. And then you also get the three big constructors that are B-tier assets that can gain you 0.3, as you can see here, 0.3 on a consistent basis, as well as on occasion gaining 1 million. And then you've still got the safety and security of a Lando Norris in, arguably the fastest car, who's going to get driver of the day just about every week by the looks of it. And I really like the look of this team on the proviso that Ferraris are going to turn up. If the Ferraris don't turn up, I don't think this team is particularly viable, because the Red Bulls and the McLarens are just going to really outscore the Ferraris. And if I'm sat here with a Ferrari constructor, I don't think that the points difference is worth, if they do go up 0.3, I don't think it's worth missing out on 20, 30, 40 points or whatever the difference is. That said, I will say that Ferraris are looking good in terms of pit stops as well. Where do they get? Fastest pit stop, second fastest pit stop. Across the season so far, I do believe that they are second for like the pit stop points as well. So the Ferraris are right up there in terms of pit stop points. So if the Ferraris do look good in practice, then this is certainly an option that I'm looking for personally. What do you guys think about this? I'm sure a lot of you can afford this, or even an improvement on this. Maybe you could get Hamilton in here, for example, if you prefer Hamilton around Silverstone. You could even argue Piastri is a better option, as I've just said. I think he's my favourite amongst these assets, but I can't go regret to him unless, if I really, really like him, I can get there by dropping Russell and getting a Hulkenberg. And again, this would be a -4, minus 20, because it's 4 transfers, so I would definitely wildcard into this. So this is definitely an option as well, something on these lines. I haven't quite made my mind up, but it's completely dependent. I haven't made my mind up because it's dependent on the Ferraris, but I like it because I like the huge budget potential, as well as getting enough points with Norris sat there. So this is a really great team. In a way, I'm kind of praying that the Ferraris look great, because I can just go to this team and be happy with it. Let's reset this though, because that's just one option. That's in the fairly unlikely scenario that the Ferraris look hot. So we'll see. Let's move on. For the record, Yeah, I think I am almost certainly moving away from Red Bull. I think a lot of people on Twitter, and I've seen a couple of YouTubers saying, Red Bull are complete write off. Perez is just terrible. You can't have them. But I still think they're kind of okay. They're still scoring reasonably well. I know they had a couple of sucky weekends in Monaco and Canada, but I think since Perez is like not DNFing, 82 points in Spain, 56 even with the Verstappen kind of mess up with Norris at the end. They're still good for pit stops points. They picked up the third fastest pit stop here in Spain. They picked up the fastest and the second fastest pit stop. So I don't think Red Bull are a write off, but as I've already said sort of extensively, I'm still a staunch believer that building budget is important, and Red Bulls are just completely stagnant on the budget. If they go up 0.1, it's like woohoo, because I think I'm ready to cut them out of my life. If I'm going to cut them out, then I'd likely to go for Mercedes again. I'd love to just jump this slot up to like a 21 million driver, for example, George Russell. Because again, I say George Russell because he's the cheapest option there. I'm a good 2 or 3 million short of that. So I can't get to him unless I do the dreaded Logan Sargent. And I will admit, this is an option. Again, if I was going to go down all the way down to Sargent, he's so much cheaper that enables me to upgrade someone like a Bottas. It leaves me 0.1 short of someone like a Tsunoda or Ocon, which is really frustrating, or 0.2 short of a Gasly, but can't have it all. So I guess I'd probably go with Hulkenberg as the next best option. So this would be a wildcard option, but Logan Sargent's in the team, and it's just like, ugh. And of course, if Sargent's in the team, that also does enable me personally to go up to someone like a Hamilton, who, again, I think for Silverstone, I think I'd rather just have that safety and security of a Hamilton over a Russell. I like Russell a lot, but I think Lewis just kind of makes me feel safer. So yeah, again, this is another option. It depends. This one, if I go with a team like this, obviously depends on the Mercedes obviously looking strong, particularly Hamilton looking strong, which they have done over the last couple of weeks. They brought in this new front wing, the upgraded lighter weight floor. There's another upgrade. I don't know what it is yet because I haven't really looked into it too extensively, but I think there's another upgrade coming this weekend. So if the Mercedes look particularly strong, this looks very appealing. The really only real downside is Sargent. That's just going to drain me of money, and I've said that budget's important, and he's sat there draining money. One thing I will say about Logan Sargent, though, he currently costs 5.3. If my memory serves me correct, I think he hit 4.5, I want to say, last year, and he froze. He didn't go down anymore despite having like DNFs or whatever. So if that's the same this year, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I think it was 4.5. So that means that kind of worst case scenario, Sargent can only lose us a 0.8 million more for the rest of the season if that stays the same as last season. I think it's 4.5. So, going Logan Sargent, he is a bit of a drain. He is definitely, a big drain. And his points output is awful. Look how many times he's actually scored more than 1 point. Nope. China and Japan, okay. Yep, China was a sprint race. He got 8. So Japan, he scored 9. Saudi Arabia scored 7. And Bahrain scored 3. The rest of the time, it was 0, negative, 1s, 0, negative. It's just appalling. Season points 1 across the season is appalling. But in terms of across, if you just hold him for the rest of the season, hope he doesn't DNF or whatever. He might not even have his seat for the rest of the season. Who knows? In terms of just enabling us to have better money for other higher budget drivers, he might be an option. I really don't like it, but the fact he can maybe only drop another 0.8 means he might be an option. I don't know. I don't personally like it, but there we go. The other option I was going to look at was kind of cutting out Lando Norris, and I really don't like it. I'm a big believer in putting the 2 times and backing the big drivers. And the best drivers at the moment in the best cars are Verstappen and Norris keeps getting driver of the day. So it would pain me greatly to drop Lando Norris, but it is under consideration because it does enable me to get the double B tier asset. And again, I could go for like a Hamilton or a Russell kind of dealer's choice here. Can't quite upgrade, but I think I can upgrade if I go to Russell. Yes. No, I'm 0.1 short. 0.1 short. This is what I'm talking about for budget, man. I need more budget. So I'd have to drop down like down to a Tsunoda, and that would give me a Hulkenberg. And I'd end up with a team like this. I got there in the end. Again, this is maximising the budget. Again, proving that budget is still very important. Because, if I was 0.1 short of this, I wouldn't be able to afford these guys. I'd be down to like a Sargent, or I'd be down to an Albon or something like that. And it's just not good. These guys, they're not optimal, but they're fine. They're much better options than a Sargent or a Bottas or an Albon as far as I'm concerned. So I really like this team as well because it gives me, again, access to 3 of the B tiers. I've got Piastri, Russell, Mercedes, and I've got Zhou, who can serve me up some overtakes. Hulkenberg, similarly, get me some overtakes, get that 0.5 game. Zhou is more than likely going to drop in value because the Saubers just aren't strong. But if he can get a few overtakes, he's terrible at qualifying, keeps qualifying like P19, P20. So if he can just finally get, if there's a few DNFs, he can gain some positions, and maybe Zhou will get me the 0.5 rise. Similarly for Tsunoda, maybe the RBs can sort out their upgrades that they've recently got, then Tsunoda could be a good option as well. And Tsunoda, if he's quite interchangeable right this second, if I was on wildcard, to just put in Ocon, exactly the same price. So it's kind of like who I prefer on the weekend sort of thing. So, but yeah, this looks great because you've got arguably the best constructor, or maybe the second best constructor. Yeah, Seesaw and all the time. So that kind of covers Lando Norris to some extent. Obviously, it doesn't cover Lando Norris as a 2 times. You'd have to trust out on either Russell or Piastri for this build, or depends on your budget, who else you might go for. But I personally really like this. Again, I'd probably put the 2 times on who looks strongest through practice. Right now, I'm thinking probably more Piastri. As maybe because there's a small hope if he does do well and he's a McLaren driver, the McLaren's just driver of the day potential, even though I think Lando's just going to get it. It's almost like a joke where people are voting now. It's almost like people are just going to vote for Norris because it's funny to keep giving it to him. I don't know. So that would, there's a big loss not having Norris on a team like this. But this is again what I arc back to. The people who are probably in the top like 500 or whatever, they've probably got a big enough budget. They've probably got 4 million and more than me, where they can just get rid of Piastri, straight swap Lando Norris in there. Can you imagine Lando Norris sat here on top of a team like this? It would look pretty incredible to me personally. And you only need, if you drop down like Ocon, like I've said already, to you're not going up there, mate, to a sergeant, then Lando Norris gets in there. So I can get there, but I'm stuck with sergeant, so I don't like it. But imagine having without sergeant there and having like a Gasly or a Tsunoda. It would look fantastic. But either way, I am kind of tempted by this team in particular because it gives me access to more B tier assets, but it does pay me slightly to lose someone like Lando Norris. So to sum up, basically where I'm at is I want to try and get more B tier assets in my team, but I don't want to compromise too much. So like I said, a team like this on screen does concern me because I don't have Norris in my team. However, it is great for budget, and I need to try and balance the budget and points gain. I don't want to just go all in on budget, but I do want to be very conscious of budget because I still think strongly about it. Don't know if you agree or disagree with the whole budget versus points thing, but I think budget's still important. And just look at this team as an example. Look, 0.3, 0.3, 0.5, 0.5, 0.3. If we reset that to my actual team, did nothing. Red Bull nothing, McLaren nothing, Saubers drop in, and then 2 rises. That's quite a big difference. So those are kind of my thoughts and feelings. I think Mercedes are certainly on the up, and I think Mercedes offer great value, and I want to get more Mercedes in my team. I think the likes of Piastri, Russell, Hamilton are great B tier options, particularly if we're dropping off the Red Bulls for someone like much cheaper, like 6 million cheaper roughly. It's quite a big difference, and that enables us to get these make these changes to get one of these drivers in. Like I say, there is the option Logan Sargent in there, and I am considering teams like this. But the bottom line is, I want some more Mercedes cover. I want some more B tier cover. I want Lando Norris to stay in my team, but I am open to the possibility of dropping him potentially in the interest of making money. So that's kind of where I'm at. All of this, all my kind of conjecture will completely depend on FP1, FP2, FP3. And then at some point during my brother's wedding ceremony, not actually the ceremony, probably during the meal or something, I don't know, I'm going to be locking in my team. So yeah, I probably will not be very active whatsoever on Twitter, etc., because I will be focused on the actual wedding, but I will also obviously keep an eye on what happens in the practice session. So yeah, that's it for me for now. Catch you soon for some more F1 fantasy content. Thanks very much for listening to me prattle on about budget for ages. Thanks, and bye.